Okay, we're starting quad pack number 1, and this is quad tutorial number 1. Make sure that you have a marker board and marker and a white and a calculator. If you don't have that in front of you, go ahead and pause this, go get it, and come back. Okay, so when we're looking at this equation, we notice something. Usually we're just solving for x, but here we see that we have to solve, we're still solving for x, but we have this square. So let's go ahead, or right, we have a power of 2. So let's go ahead and talk about what this problem really means. It means we have something that we don't know what it is, right? That's what x stands for. A number that we're going to solve for that we don't know now. And we're going to take this number and we're going to square it. Another way to think about that is just like we learned in our poly packet, x squared is x times x. So here's another way to look at it, that some number times itself is going to equal 25. And so we look at that and we're like, oh, 5, right? 5 would work because 5 times 5 is 25. Now, right now, I'm just doing things the logical way so you can understand, and then I'm going to show you the more efficient way, but we're just talking through this so it makes sense. So it makes sense that our answer is going to be 5, but what if I told you, wait a minute, there are 2 answers. There's something else when multiplied by itself equals 25. Think about it for a second. That's right. I'm hearing some of you, I imagine, thinking, wait a minute, -5 times -5 also equals 25. Isn't that true? So x could equal 2 things. Either x could equal 5 or x could equal -5. And so let's see what's behind this square. Okay, so I know that there's a little square on the bottom of your notes page. If this helps you to think of a number that when multiplied by itself equals 25, if that helps you to know what it means when you see x squared, write it down. If you don't need to, don't write it down. So having gone through this, we're going to look at this problem again. We already know that the answer is x is equal to 5 or x is equal to -5, but let's talk about what we would do as far as solving it as soon as we look at it. So when I see a square, I think about how can I get rid of that squared? Like remember if we had, going back to the side here, wonder if we had 3x equals 12 and we want to solve for x. Well, we would note that 3 and x are being multiplied by each other. So to get rid of the 3, we have to do the opposite of multiplication, which is division, right? And then we solve for x. Okay, that's not our problem right now, but our problem has a square. So do you know what the opposite of a square is? That's right, it's a square root. So to get rid of this squared, what I have to do is take the square root. Because the square root of a square, they cancel each other out, and we're just left with an x. But remember, whatever I do to one side, if I'm going to take the square root of the left side, I have to take the square root of the right side, or the other side. And so here's the deal. Whenever we take the square root of both sides of an equation, we have to put something in front of the square root that includes our number. We have to put a plus or minus. Because when you hit if you put the square root, and I hope that you can look at your calculator now and see where that square root sign is. I'm pretty sure you have to hit second and then the x squared button, and that pulls up an square root rather. And you put your 25 in and you hit enter, you're just going to get a 5. So we have to remind ourselves, wait a minute, there are 2 answers, either a positive 5 or a negative 5. So instead of writing, we could write x equals 5 or x equals -5. We could write it that way. This is a more concise way to write it, that x is plus or minus 5. So I did a lot of talking with this first problem because I wanted you to understand it conceptually, and then also how we cancel something out by doing the opposite when we're solving equations. So right now, I've got a problem that looks very similar to what you just put in your notes, and I want you to switch to marker boards. So go ahead and switch to marker boards, pause this, do it by yourself, and then unpause it and see if you got the same answer. All right, go ahead and pause it. All right, so you unpause me, you took the square root of both sides, and you remembered, wait a minute, If we're taking the square root of both sides of an equation, we have to add the plus or minus right, we're not adding it, we have to place the plus or minus right in front of the square root sign on the side that the number is on. So the square root of a square, that cancels each other out. I'm left with an x. Plus or minus I bring down. I'm going to use my calculator. Second, x squared brings up the square root sign. I'll put the 64, hit enter, and we'll get 8. And that's true, right? 8 squared equals 64, and so does negative 8 squared. Negative 8 times negative 8 is 64. All right, so let's switch back to notes. This looks a little bit different. We're going to have an additional step before we can solve for x. Just like when we're solving equations where there's not a square, when there is a square, our goal is still to get x by itself. So I want x squared to be by itself. And so I've got to get rid of this minus 9. What am I going to do to get rid of the minus 9? That's right, I'm going to add it. And whenever I do to one side of the equation, I have to do to the other. So then this is gone. I bring down my x squared. 0 plus 9 is 9. Now it looks just like the first problem, right? I've got x squared. I want to solve for x, so to get rid of the square, I do the opposite. Take the square root of both sides, and I'm like, oh, wait a minute. Whenever I take the square root of both sides of an equation, I have to put a plus or minus in front of the square root that has the number. So the square and the square root are opposite of each other. They cancel each other out, and we're left with an x. I bring down the plus or minus. I use my calculator to find out the square root of 9, or I may know that already, right? What number times itself equals 9 when you multiply it? It equals 3. So that's my answer. This indicates I have two answers. Both positive 3 and negative 3 work when you plug them into the original equation. So now what I want you to do is switch over to your marker boards, and I want you to pause this video, do the problem, and then unpause it and make sure you have it right. Okay, so we're back. You're checking your answer. You probably added 100 to both sides. You got x squared equals 100. You took the square root of both sides. You remembered to put your plus or minus in front. And you said x equals plus or minus 10. If you didn't get that right, why don't you pause the video and so you can go back over what you wrote, but I'm hoping you got it right. So let's move to the third problem in your notes. Once again, we have to do something so that the x squared can be by itself, right? So I look at the 3 and the x squared. They're being multiplied by each other. So to get rid of the 3, I have to do the opposite, which is division. So I'm going to divide both sides by 3. And 3 divided by 3 is 1, right? And 1x squared is just x squared. And then 12 divided by 3 is 4. So when I have x squared by itself on one side of the equation, I know that I can get x by itself just by doing the opposite of a square, which is a square root. But what I do to one side, I better do to the other. And if I'm taking the square root of both sides of the equation, I have to put the plus or minus in front of the side that's the number. Square root of a square, we get rid of, that's x. Plus or minus, we bring down, and square root of 4 is 2. All right, you know what to do. Let's switch over to your marker boards and pause. And go ahead and do this one and unpause. Okay, so you divided both sides by 5. You got 9. Take the square root of both sides, you put the plus or minus in front of the square root of 9, and you got x equals plus or minus 3. Awesome. Let's look at the last problem in this tutorial. We want to get x squared by itself, so we can get x by itself. And so we have two options. We can either get rid of the 99 first or the negative 4. Which one do you think is going to be easier to do? That's right. We want to get rid of the 99 first. If we try to get rid of the negative 4 first, it'd be a real mess. So let's go ahead and get rid of the plus 99. So the opposite of that would be to subtract 99. So we'll bring down the negative 4x squared. This is gone. We'll bring down the equal. Negative 1 minus 99. If you're not sure of that, you can pick up your calculator and check. And one last thing. Ooh, that square kind of looks funny. Let's see, one last thing. That negative 4 is in the way of getting my x squared by itself. Since negative 4 is being multiplied by x squared, we're going to divide both sides by negative 4. And we get x squared equals, if you want to stop and put that in your calculator, you can. You realize, or you can do it in your head, you realize a negative and a negative cancel out, and 4 goes into 100 25 times. And now we're back to what we started with at the beginning of this tutorial, where we have the x squared equals a number. We're going to do the opposite of the square. We take the square root of both sides. When we do take the square root of both sides, we have to remember to put the plus or minus. The square root of a square cancels out. You bring down the plus or minus, and the square root of 25, what number times itself gives me 25 is 5. So we have two answers, both 5 and negative 5 work. All right, let's do one more marker board so you can practice. We practice so that our brains can build the connections that are stronger so that our memory stays with us and isn't gone tomorrow. We want to have a memory of this learning so we can build on it every day. So here we go. Pause it and then come back. All right, you're back. Hopefully on your marker board you subtracted both sides by 30. You divided both sides by negative 2. And you took the square root of both sides, and you got x equals plus or minus 4. Awesome job. I will see you back for tutorial number 2. Thanks for joining me.